the cradle of empires, Persia's magnificent dawn. Imagine standing atop the windswept highlands of the Iranian Plateau some 2,600 years ago. Below you, a patchwork of valleys nestles between jagged mountain ranges, while distant trade caravans snake their way through narrow passes. This dramatic landscape, both barrier and bridge, would give birth to one of history's most influential civilizations. The story of ancient Persia begins not with conquest but with the land itself. The Iranian Plateau's natural fortifications, the towering Zagros Mountains to the west and the formidable Hindu Kush to the east, created a perfect crucible for civilization. These weren't just defensive barriers, they were channels funneling ideas, goods, and peoples between the great centers of Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Indus Valley. Geography is destiny, the saying goes, and nowhere proves this more vividly than ancient Persia. From tribal fragments to imperial tapestry, before Persia became an empire, the region was home to sophisticated civilizations that laid crucial groundwork. The Elamites, with their capital at Susa, developed distinctive artistic traditions and a unique script that scholars still work to fully decipher. Their temples and palaces weren't just buildings but statements of cultural identity that would later influence Persian imperial aesthetics. Meanwhile, in the northwest, the horse-riding Medes were forging something revolutionary, a kingdom that united previously scattered Iranian tribes. When they helped topple the mighty Assyrian Empire in 612 BCE, destroying its capital Nineveh, they announced themselves as a formidable power on the world stage. But it was a man born of two worlds who would transform these foundations into something extraordinary. Cyrus the Great, the visionary who changed history. Picture a young prince whose very blood represented a political alliance, Cyrus, son of Cambyses Veto of Anshan and Mandane, a Median princess. This dual heritage wasn't just biographical trivia, it was political dynamite. When Cyrus overthrew his grandfather, the Median king Astyages, in 550 BCE, witnesses describe not just a military victory but a moment of historical rupture. The Persian tribes, long divided, rallied behind this charismatic leader who understood something profound about empire building. Lasting power comes not from subjugation but inclusion. The Cyrus cylinder, a baked clay barrel inscribed with his proclamations, reveals a ruler centuries ahead of his time. While other conquerors destroyed temples and imposed their gods, Cyrus restored religious sites and respected local traditions. When he conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, he didn't just take a city, he liberated a people, allowing the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. "I am Cyrus, king of the world," the cylinder proclaims, not as a boast but as a statement of responsibility toward diverse peoples under his protection. Unearthing the Persian dawn. At Pasargadae, Cyrus's capital, archaeologists have uncovered the physical manifestation of his vision. His tomb, a simple yet dignified structure, stands in stark contrast to the ostentatious monuments of other ancient rulers. The surrounding gardens, designed in the Paradisa style, from which we get our word paradise, featured geometric waterways and carefully arranged plantings that would influence garden design for millennia. The multilingual inscriptions found throughout early Persian sites reveal a sophisticated understanding of imperial communication. By addressing subjects in their own languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, Persian rulers demonstrated respect while ensuring their messages reached all corners of their diverse realm. At Anshan, excavations have revealed how the Achaemenids skillfully wove themselves into existing historical narratives, positioning their dynasty as legitimate heirs to ancient traditions while simultaneously creating something entirely new. What began in these rugged highlands would eventually stretch from the Indus to the Mediterranean, encompassing diverse peoples, languages, and traditions within a remarkably stable imperial system. The Persian Royal Road, a highway spanning over 1,600 miles, connected the empire physically, while administrative innovations like standardized coinage and a sophisticated postal system bound it functionally. The Persian achievement wasn't just in conquering territory, but in creating a model of governance that balanced central authority with local autonomy, imperial identity with cultural diversity. When Alexander the Great later conquered the Persian Empire, he found himself adopting many Persian customs and administrative practices, the ultimate complement from conqueror to conquered. Today, as we excavate the palaces of Pasargadae or decipher the inscriptions at Behistun, we're not just studying ancient history, we're uncovering the blueprints of an imperial vision that would influence every empire that followed, from Rome to Britain. The Persian innovation, unity without uniformity, remains as relevant in our diverse modern world as it was when Cyrus first proclaimed himself king of the four corners of the world. The rise of the Achaemenid Empire, when Persia ruled the world. The desert wind carries whispers of ancient glory as it sweeps across the ruins of Persepolis. Here, among fallen columns and weathered reliefs, lies the story of history's first truly global superpower, an empire whose innovations in governance, tolerance, and administration would echo through millennia. The visionary, Cyrus the Great, 550–530 BCE. Dawn breaks over the battlefield near the Median capital of Ecbatana in 550 BCE. The air hangs heavy with dust and anticipation as Persian warriors await their commander's signal. At their head stands Cyrus, charismatic, calculated, and poised to reshape history. With a thunderous charge, his forces don't just defeat the Median army, they incorporate it, absorbing its soldiers into their ranks. This first victory revealed Cyrus's signature approach, conquest followed by integration rather than subjugation. A warrior wins a battle, but a statesman wins the peace that follows, goes an old Persian saying that could have been written for Cyrus himself. 6 years later, he faced the legendary King Croesus of Lydia, whose wealth was so vast it entered our language as an idiom, rich as Croesus. The Lydian king, confident in his oracle's prediction that a great empire would fall, attacked Cyrus, not realizing the prophecy referred to his own realm. When Croesus's capital at Sardis fell, Cyrus reportedly spared the defeated king, appointing him as an advisor, the first of many enemies transformed into assets. But it was in Babylon where Cyrus truly demonstrated his revolutionary vision. Instead of scaling the city's massive walls, which had repelled conquerors for centuries, his engineers diverted the Euphrates River, allowing troops to march along the riverbed and enter the city during a religious festival in 539 BCE. Babylon's citizens awoke the next morning to find their city captured with minimal bloodshed. What happened next astonished the ancient world. Rather than desecrating Babylon's temples, Cyrus worshipped at them. Rather than enslaving its people, he protected their rights. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay barrel inscribed with his proclamation, declares, "I sought the welfare of the city of Babylon and all its sanctuaries. As for the citizens of Babylon, I freed them from their bonds." For the exiled Jews held captive in Babylon, this policy meant return to their homeland and rebuilding their temple in Jerusalem. For subject peoples across the empire, it meant local customs and religions would be respected, a radical departure from the brutal assimilation policies of earlier empires like Assyria. By his death in 530 BCE, fighting nomadic tribes on his eastern frontier, Cyrus had created an empire spanning 3 continents. But his greatest conquest wasn't territory, it was the invention of a new model of empire based on inclusion rather than oppression. The pharaoh, Cambyses II, 530–522 BCE. When Cyrus's son Cambyses II inherited the throne, one glaring gap remained in the Persian imperial map. Egypt, wealthy, ancient, and seemingly untouchable behind its desert barriers. In 525 BCE, Cambyses led his army across the Sinai Desert, an achievement requiring elaborate logistics to keep thousands of men supplied with water in one of Earth's most inhospitable environments. At Pelusium, near the Nile Delta, he faced the full might of Pharaoh Psamtik III's forces. The Battle of Pelusium entered legend for Cambyses' psychological warfare. Knowing Egyptians revered cats as sacred, he reportedly had his soldiers paint feline images on their shields, and drove actual cats before his army. Egyptian archers, reluctant to risk hitting the animals, held their fire just long enough for Persian forces to close the gap. Whether true or apocryphal, this tale captures something essential about Persian military success: the blending of force with cultural understanding. 10 days later, Memphis fell, and Egypt, undefeated for nearly 3,000 years, became a Persian province. Cambyses adopted Egyptian royal titles and respected local religious traditions, following his father's example. But governing Egypt proved challenging. The Persian administrative system, designed for smaller provinces, struggled to manage Egypt's complex irrigation-based economy and deeply entrenched priesthood. Meanwhile, trouble brewed back home. Cambyses' extended absence created opportunity for pretenders to the throne. In 522 BCE, as he hurried back to suppress a rebellion led by a Median priest claiming to be Cambyses' brother Bardiya, the emperor died, either from an infected wound or by his own hand. His body was returned to Persia, but the empire he had expanded now teetered on the brink of disintegration. The administrator, Darius the Great, 522-486 BCE. Amidst the chaos following Cambyses' death, one man saw opportunity. Darius, a distant relative of the royal family and commander in Cambyses' army, moved decisively to claim the throne. Together with 6 noble conspirators, he assassinated the impostor king and declared himself the legitimate heir to Cyrus's legacy. Rebellion immediately erupted across the empire. The Behistun inscription, carved high on a cliff face in western Iran, records Darius's own account. These are the provinces which became rebellious. The lie made them rebellious, that they deceived the people. Afterwards, Ahura Mazda put them into my hand. In a single year, Darius fought 19 battles against 9 self-proclaimed kings. His military brilliance restored unity, but he understood that swords alone couldn't hold an empire together. What followed was perhaps history's first grand exercise in bureaucratic genius. Darius divided the empire into 20 satrapies, provinces, each with clear responsibilities for taxation and military recruitment. He appointed satraps, governors from the Persian nobility, but ensured their loyalty through a network of spies known as the king's eyes and ears. Standardized gold and silver coins, the darik and siglos, replaced the hodgepodge of local currencies, facilitating trade across 3 continents. Regular royal inspections, standardized weights and measures, and codified laws brought predictability to commerce. Most impressive was Darius's infrastructure program. The Royal Road, stretching 2,600 miles from Susa to Sardis, featured post houses every 14 miles where imperial couriers could obtain fresh horses. This ancient pony express system allowed messages to travel the entire empire in just 7 days, an achievement not matched until the telegraph 2 millennia later. At Persepolis, city of Persians, Darius built his crowning achievement. Rising from a massive artificial terrace, its palaces and audience halls featured soaring columns topped with bull-headed capitals and staircases adorned with tribute-bearing delegations from across the empire. Every spring at Nowruz, Persian New Year, these carved reliefs came to life as actual ambassadors climbed those grand staircases, bearing gifts symbolizing their region's submission and contribution to the imperial system. The Persian achievement. By 486 BCE, when Darius died, the Achaemenid Empire had achieved an unprecedented synthesis: military might backed by administrative efficiency, central authority balanced with local autonomy, and imperial identity enriched by cultural diversity. At its height, this Persian creation governed 44% of the world's population. Its innovations, from postal systems to standardized currency, religious tolerance to meritocratic bureaucracy, created a template that would influence every subsequent empire. The Greek historian Herodotus, despite his bias against Persia, couldn't help but admire the efficiency of its imperial system. "There is nothing in the world that travels faster than Persian messengers," he wrote. "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their appointed course with utmost speed. When Alexander the Great finally conquered the Persian Empire in 330 BCE, he recognized the brilliance of what the Achaemenids had built. He adopted Persian court customs, married Persian nobility, and retained much of their administrative system, the ultimate tribute from conqueror to conquered. The Achaemenid achievement reminds us that empire building isn't just about conquest, but about creating systems that transform diverse peoples into a coherent whole. In their solution, unity without uniformity, strength without oppression, the Persians created a political model whose influence would outlast their monuments and continue to resonate in our own complex multicultural world. The Persian Wars, when East met West in blood and fire. Have you ever wondered how the course of history can pivot on a single day, a single battle, a single decision? The clash between the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states wasn't just a series of military engagements. It was a collision of civilizations that would shape the very idea of Western identity for millennia to come. A tinderbox, waiting for a spark. The trouble began where the mountainous Greek mainland dissolves into a constellation of islands scattered across the Aegean Sea. Here, along the western coast of what is now Turkey, Greek colonists had built prosperous cities over centuries. These Ionian Greeks, cousins to the mainland Hellenes, had fallen under Persian rule as the empire expanded westward, but they never quite reconciled themselves to foreign domination. In 499 BCE, Aristagoras, the ambitious Persian-appointed governor of Miletus, lit the fuse. After a failed expedition against the island of Naxos threatened his position, he made a desperate gamble, rebellion against his Persian masters. Seeking allies, he sailed to mainland Greece, where he found a sympathetic ear in Athens. "How long will you allow your brothers to live in chains?" he asked the Athenian assembly. "Are we not all Hellenes? Do we not worship the same gods?" His appeals to shared identity, combined with promises of rich plunder, convinced Athens and neighboring Eretria to send ships and soldiers. Thus began what history calls the Ionian Revolt, the opening act in a drama that would span generations. The burning of Sardis and Persian vengeance. Picture the Persian provincial capital of Sardis in 498 BCE, its markets bustling with traders from across Asia, its citadel seemingly impregnable atop a steep hill. Now imagine the shock when Greek forces appeared at its gates, their bronze armor gleaming in the morning sun. Though they couldn't breach the Acropolis, the Greeks set fire to the lower city. The flames, fanned by spring winds, devoured wooden structures and leapt from building to building until most of Sardis lay in smoldering ruins. As the Greeks retreated toward the coast, Persian cavalry caught them in open country and inflicted heavy casualties. But the damage was done, both physically to Sardis and symbolically to Persian prestige. When news reached King Darius at his distant capital of Susa, witnesses report that he shot an arrow into the sky and prayed, "Grant me vengeance upon the Athenians." The revolt continued for 6 years before being crushed at the naval battle of Lade in 494 BCE. The Persians, masters of psychological warfare, had systematically undermined Greek unity by offering clemency to any city that abandoned the coalition. One by one, contingents slipped away until only the Milesians and a few allies remained. The result was massacre and enslavement for the defeated Ionians. But Darius hadn't forgotten his vow of vengeance against Athens. As one Persian official reportedly reminded him each day at dinner, "Master, remember the Athenians." David versus Goliath at Marathon. In late summer 490 BCE, Persian ships darkened the horizon off the coast of Marathon, a coastal plain just 26 miles northeast of Athens. Commanded by experienced generals Datis and Artaphernes, the Persian force numbered perhaps 25,000, not the vast army Darius might have wished for, but sufficient, they believed, to punish Athens and Eretria for their insolence. The Athenians, facing existential threat, dispatched a runner named Pheidippides to Sparta, begging for aid. According to legend, he covered the 150 miles in just 2 days. The Spartans, however, were celebrating a religious festival and refused to march until the full moon, still days away. So when the Persian troops disembarked at Marathon, they faced only the Athenians and a small contingent from Plataea, perhaps 10,000 men in total. Leading the Athenian forces was Miltiades, a general with intimate knowledge of Persian tactics from his time serving in their army. As dawn broke over the plain, the outnumbered Greeks faced a daunting sight: row upon row of Persian infantry with their distinctive wicker shields, backed by archers whose volleys could darken the sky. The conventional wisdom would have been to wait defensively, but Miltiades had other ideas. The Greek hoplites, citizen soldiers wearing bronze armor and carrying heavy shields, advanced at a run across the open ground, closing the distance before Persian archers could unleash their full potential. Miltiades had deliberately weakened his center while strengthening his wings. As the Persian force pushed forward into the intentionally weakened Greek center, the stronger Greek wings enveloped them in a deadly pincer movement. "They fought in a manner worthy of being beheld," wrote Herodotus. When the dust settled, some 60 to 400 Persian bodies littered the plain compared to just 192 Athenians. The survivor Pheidippides, or perhaps another runner, raced back to Athens with news of the victory, reportedly gasping, "We have won," before collapsing from exhaustion, the inspiration for our modern marathon race, though historians debate the accuracy of this particular detail. Xerxes' dreams of conquest. Darius died before he could mount another expedition against Greece, but his son Xerxes inherited both his throne and his ambition. For years, the new great king gathered resources on an unprecedented scale, conscripting troops from across his vast domains, stockpiling supplies, and even ordering the construction of a pontoon bridge across the Hellespont, modern Dardanelles, to bypass the treacherous sea journey. By 480 BCE, Xerxes had assembled perhaps the most diverse army ever seen: immortals from Persia, Assyrian spearmen, Egyptian marines, Bactrian cavalry, Ethiopian archers, Indian charioteers, each unit with distinct weapons, armor, and fighting styles. Greek historians claim the force numbered in the millions, though modern estimates suggest a more plausible but still overwhelming force of around 200,000 soldiers and 600 ships. As this juggernaut approached Greece, many city-states chose submission, sending earth and water as tokens of surrender. But Athens and Sparta, along with their closest allies, prepared for resistance. The hot gates, Thermopylae immortal. Stand. The Greek strategy focused on bottlenecks where Persian numbers would count for less: a narrow mountain pass at Thermopylae for the army and the Strait of Artemisium for the navy. King Leonidas of Sparta led a force of just 7,000 Greeks, including his personal bodyguard of 300 Spartans, professional warriors trained from childhood for this moment. For 2 days, the Greeks held the narrow pass known as the Hot Gates against wave after wave of Persian attacks. Even the elite immortals, Xerxes' personal guard, failed to break through the wall of bronze shields and bristling spears. The Persian king, watching from a golden throne on a nearby hillside, reportedly stood up 3 times in rage and disbelief. But betrayal undid what valor defended. A local Greek named Ephialtes, seeking royal reward, revealed to the Persians a mountain path that would allow them to outflank the defenders. When scouts reported enemy troops appearing behind their position, Leonidas dismissed most contingents, keeping only his Spartans, some Thespians who refused to leave, and Thebans of questionable loyalty. What followed was not a battle, but a last stand of mythic proportions. Surrounded and outnumbered perhaps 50 to 1, the remaining Greeks fought until their spears shattered, then with swords, and finally with bare hands and teeth. A Persian demand to surrender arms prompted Leonidas's legendary reply, "Malin Labe, come and take them." The final Spartans, having retreated to a small hill, were overwhelmed by arrows. Xerxes, in a rare act of spite, ordered Leonidas's head placed on a stake, unwittingly creating a martyr whose sacrifice would inspire Greek resistance for generations. Fire and water, Athens. Burns, Salamis decides. With Thermopylae fallen, Athens lay exposed. The Athenians made an extraordinary decision. They evacuated their entire city, ferrying women, children, and elders to nearby islands, while all able-bodied men took to their ships. When Persian forces arrived, they found Athens nearly deserted. Xerxes ordered the city burned, with particular attention to its sacred temples. But the Greek strategy, guided by the wily Athenian leader Themistocles, had always focused on naval victory. Through calculated misinformation and psychological manipulation, Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the narrow strait between Athens and the island of Salamis, waters that negated Persian numerical advantage and played to Greek strengths. The Battle of Salamis unfolded like a trap closing. Greek triremes, nimble warships powered by 170 oarsmen arranged in 3 tiers, rammed and shattered the larger, less maneuverable Persian vessels. As Persian ships attempted to retreat, they collided with reinforcements still entering the strait, creating a chaotic tangle that the Greeks methodically destroyed. Xerxes, watching again from a golden throne, this time on Mount Aigaleo, witnessed the annihilation of his navy, and with it his dreams of European conquest. Fearing his bridge across the Hellespont might be destroyed, cutting off his retreat, the great king withdrew with much of his army, leaving his general Mardonius with a still formidable force to continue operations. The earth and the dust ran red with blood. The following spring, 479 BCE, brought the final act of this epic struggle. At Plataea, a broad plain in central Greece, the largest Greek army ever assembled confronted Mardonius's remaining forces. Under the leadership of the Spartan regent Pausanias, the Greek hoplites, now numbering around 80,000, faced perhaps 100,000 Persians and their Greek allies. After days of maneuvering and skirmishing, a full-scale battle erupted. The disciplined Spartan phalanx proved devastating against Persian infantry, whose wicker shields and linen armor provided little protection against Greek bronze and iron. As Mardonius led a desperate cavalry charge, a Spartan named Arimnestus hurled a rock that struck the Persian general's head, killing him instantly. With their leader fallen, Persian resistance collapsed. The slaughter that followed was so complete that, according to Herodotus, hardly a Persian of the whole army escaped. The Greek historian's account may be exaggerated, but archaeological evidence confirms extensive Persian casualties. Survivors fled northward, pursued by vengeful Greeks all the way to the Hellespont. On the same day as Plataea, Greek ships destroyed the remnants of the Persian fleet at Mycale on the Ionian coast, marking the beginning of a Greek counteroffensive that would eventually free the Ionian cities from Persian rule. The torch that lit Western civilization. The Persian Wars didn't just preserve Greek independence, they transformed Greek self-perception. A collection of quarrelsome city-states had stood against the mightiest empire on earth and emerged victorious. This triumph catalyzed what historians call the Greek Golden Age, an extraordinary flowering of art, architecture, drama, philosophy, and political theory. In Athens, the war generation channeled their newfound confidence into ambitious building projects like the Parthenon and radical democratic reforms that expanded citizen participation. Aeschylus, who fought at Marathon, created tragedy as we know it with plays like The Persians, remarkably humanizing the very enemies he had faced in battle. Herodotus, inspired by these events, invented historical writing, traveling extensively to interview veterans and witnesses. These innovations form the bedrock of what we now call Western civilization. When we debate in public forums, study empirical history, produce representational art, or value individual liberty against tyranny, we're drawing on intellectual traditions galvanized by the Persian Wars. For Persia, the defeat marked a strategic recalibration rather than imperial collapse. The Achaemenid Empire remained powerful for another 150 years, though its focus shifted eastward. Persian culture continued to influence Greek art, architecture, and administrative practices, demonstrating that even in defeat, this sophisticated civilization left an indelible mark on its adversaries. The war's most enduring legacy may be its narrative of resistance, how determined smaller nations can successfully stand against overwhelming force when united by shared values and skillful leadership. From American revolutionaries to modern independence movements, societies facing imperial power have drawn inspiration from Thermopylae, Marathon, and Salamis. As you walk today through Athens' ancient agora or stand by the simple memorial at Thermopylae bearing Simonides' famous epitaph, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie," you're experiencing the living memory of a conflict that did nothing less than shape the course of human civilization. What if those Persian arrows had found their mark at Marathon? What if Ephialtes had kept his secret at Thermopylae? What if the wind had blown differently at Salamis? History pivoted on these moments, and we are all inheritors of their consequences. The architecture of empire, how Persia governed half the world. Imagine standing before a royal official in ancient Persia requesting permission to travel from Egypt to India. The official doesn't panic at your ambitious journey. Instead, he calmly hands you a clay tablet, an imperial passport, and explains your route. 20 days to Babylon, changing horses at royal post stations every 15 miles. Another month to reach the Indus Valley, with accommodations at government rest houses along the way. The document shows the taxes you've paid and guarantees safe passage in 13 languages. This wasn't fantasy, but everyday reality in history's first truly functional multicultural empire. While Rome is often celebrated as the master of administration, it was Persia that wrote the original handbook on how to govern vast territories and diverse peoples. The Persian solution: divide and connect. The central challenge facing Persian rulers was daunting: how to control territories stretching over 3,000 miles, encompassing dozens of languages, religions, and cultures without modern technology. The answer they devised, the satrapy system, was brilliant in its balance of centralized authority and local autonomy. The genius of Persian administration, notes historian Tom Holland, was knowing when to impose and when to adapt. Under Darius the First, the empire was divided into approximately 20 provinces or satrapies, each under a governor called a satrap, typically a Persian nobleman or trusted relative of the king. These satraps enjoyed considerable latitude in day-to-day governance but operated within clear imperial guidelines. Each province had 3 key officials who functioned as checks and balances on each other: the satrap, governor, the military commander, and the imperial secretary. All 3 reported independently to the king, creating a system where conspiracy became difficult and accountability remained high. Trust but verify was the Persian approach long before the phrase existed. The famous king's eyes and ears, imperial inspectors who appeared in provinces without warning, kept satraps honest. These royal agents, backed by elite military units, could arrive unannounced to audit accounts, investigate complaints, or simply observe administrative practices. One surviving Babylonian tablet records the arrival of such an inspector. The king's eye arrived from Susa with 20 guards. He examined the tribute records and questioned 3 local officials separately. The satrap ordered a feast in his honor, but he declined, saying he eats only at his own table. The money machine, financing an empire. The economic engine powering this vast imperial machine was a sophisticated taxation system that standardized contributions across diverse regions. Rather than imposing uniform cash payments, Persian authorities assessed each province according to its resources. Gold-rich regions like Lydia paid in precious metals, 400 talents of silver annually, a staggering 12 tons. Agricultural areas contributed in grain, livestock, or specialized products. Ethiopia sent gold, ebony, and elephant tusks. Arabia delivered frankincense. India provided gold dust and exotic woods. This pragmatic approach recognized regional differences while ensuring the empire's coffers remained full. Provincial taxes funded not just the court and military but also imperial infrastructure, roads, bridges, irrigation systems, and grain reserves that benefited local populations. Darius I revolutionized commerce by introducing standardized gold and silver coins, the daric and siglos. Merchants from Athens to Afghanistan could now conduct business using currency whose purity and weight were guaranteed by the great king himself. The Daric became so trusted that it continued circulating for centuries after the empire's fall. A merchant's diary found in Babylon records traded 5 bolts of purple wool for 8 gold darics, which I can use in any market from here to the Greek lands. Before the king's coins, such a journey would require exchanging money 7 times, losing value at each exchange. The imperial nervous system, communication and transportation. The famous Royal Road, stretching from Sardis in western Turkey to Susa in Iran, wasn't just a highway but the backbone of an imperial nervous system. Along its 1,600-mile length, couriers carried official communications using a relay system that Herodotus called the swiftest of all human arrangements. At intervals of a day's ride, post houses offered fresh horses, food, and shelter exclusively for government couriers. A message that would take a normal traveler 3 months to deliver could reach the king in just 7 days using this system. One Persian official wrote to another, "The revolt in Ionia was reported to the king before the rebels had finished celebrating their first victory. Our response forces arrived while they were still arguing about what to do next." These royal roads weren't merely for government use. Merchants, pilgrims, and ordinary travelers benefited from the safety and infrastructure they provided. Caravanserais, rest houses spaced a day's journey apart, offered shelter, food, and protection. Official highway patrols reduced banditry, while standardized tolls and regulations created predictability for traders. The integration of waterways into this transportation network was equally impressive. The Persian-built canal connecting the Red Sea to the Nile, completed 2,000 years before the Suez Canal, allowed ships to sail directly from Persia to Egypt without circumnavigating Africa. Celestial authority, Zoroastrianism, and the divine right to rule. If administrative systems were the body of the Persian Empire, Zoroastrianism provided its soul. This ancient faith, founded by the prophet Zoroaster, Zarathustra, centered on the worship of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and emphasized the cosmic struggle between truth and falsehood. Persian kings positioned themselves as Ahura Mazda's earthly representatives, tasked with expanding the realm of truth and order against chaos and deceit. The Behistun inscription of Darius the Maupersonner makes this relationship explicit. "By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I am king. Ahura Mazda bestowed the kingdom upon me." This divine mandate wasn't merely propaganda, it shaped royal behavior. Persian kings were expected to embody truth, justice, and order. The Zoroastrian emphasis on purity is reflected in Persian administrative practices, with their focus on clear accountability and honest governance. A court official once warned a corrupt tax collector, "When you stand before the king, you stand before Ahura Mazda's chosen. Hidden coins weigh heavily in the divine scales." Yet remarkably, this powerful state religion didn't lead to persecution of other faiths. On the contrary, Persian religious policy is characterized by unprecedented tolerance. Cyrus the Great not only permitted the Jews to return from Babylonian exile but funded the rebuilding of their temple in Jerusalem. Egyptian, Babylonian, Greek, and countless other religious traditions continued freely under Persian rule. This wasn't just kindness but calculated policy. By respecting local gods, Persian kings gained the support of native priesthoods, who often became valuable administrative partners. Religious tolerance became a cornerstone of imperial stability, turning potential resistance into willing participation. Theaters of majesty, the imperial capitals. If you wanted to understand Persian power at its most concentrated, you would visit one of the empire's 4 great capitals, Persepolis, Susa, Ecbatana, or Babylon. Each served different functions in the imperial system, and the king traveled between them seasonally, bringing the court and administration with him. Persepolis, the city of Persians, was the ceremonial heart of the empire, designed to awe and intimidate. Built on a massive artificial terrace against a mountain backdrop, its construction under Darius the One employed craftsmen from across the empire, each contributing their distinctive skills. Imagine approaching Persepolis as a foreign ambassador. First, you ascend the grand dual staircase, designed to accommodate processions of horses and nobility. The shallow steps, each just 4 inches high, create an illusion that dignitaries are floating upward rather than climbing. Passing through the Gate of All Nations, you encounter colossal winged bulls with human heads, protective deities appropriated from Assyrian tradition but reinterpreted in Persian style. Inside the Apadana audience hall, 72 columns soaring 65 feet high support a cedar roof. The capitals feature back-to-back bulls, symbolizing strength and fertility. Along the walls, stone reliefs depict representatives from 23 nations bringing tribute, each meticulously carved with their distinctive ethnic features, clothing, and gifts. One Greek visitor wrote, "I had heard tales of Persepolis but dismissed them as exaggeration. Now I stand humbled. The size alone would be impressive, but it is the details that overwhelm. Every surface covered with precise carvings, every proportion calculated to inspire awe." Susa served as the administrative capital, where the business of empire happened. Here, the royal architecture emphasized functionality alongside splendor. Administrators processed taxes, diplomatic correspondence, and legal matters in purpose-built complexes. The archives building contained thousands of clay tablets documenting imperial business in multiple languages. Pasargadae, Cyrus the Great's capital, was designed around gardens, the original paradise, from the Persian word pairidesa, meaning walled garden. These weren't merely decorative but represented the king's ability to create order and abundance in the natural world, mirroring the cosmic order maintained by Ahura Mazda. A day in imperial Persia. To truly understand this world, let's follow several individuals through a typical day in the Persian Empire. In the provincial capital of Sardis, a Lydian merchant named Adrastus begins his day by checking shipments of wool arriving from central Anatolia. He pays the imperial customs duty using Persian darics, knowing these coins will be accepted everywhere from Athens to Babylon. He consults a clay tablet contract written in Aramaic, the empire's administrative language, though he himself speaks Lydian. An imperial garrison maintains order in the city, but they keep to themselves unless needed. Hundreds of miles away in Susa, a young Persian nobleman named Artabanus serves as an assistant to the imperial treasurer. Today he's reviewing tribute records from Egypt, noting discrepancies that might indicate corruption or theft. Later he'll attend a court where judges apply the royal law code, a standardized system that incorporates elements from Babylonian and Egyptian legal traditions while maintaining consistent principles across the empire. Meanwhile, in a small Jewish settlement near Jerusalem, a temple priest named Ezra studies religious texts that his community has preserved since their return from Babylonian exile, a return made possible by Cyrus's policy of religious tolerance. Nearby, a Persian official collects the annual tribute but makes no attempt to interfere with local customs or religious practices. This diversity within unity, allowing local identity to flourish within a consistent imperial framework, was the Persian achievement. It wasn't perfect, and revolts did occur, but the system's resilience allowed it to absorb shocks and adapt over 2 centuries of rule. The Persian legacy. When Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in the 330s BCE, he found himself inheriting an administrative marvel. Despite his initial desire to impose Greek customs, Alexander soon adopted Persian administrative practices, court ceremonies, and even clothing, recognizing the sophistication of what he had conquered. The Persian system of provincial governance influenced every subsequent empire, from the Seleucids to the Romans, Byzantines, and even modern federal systems. Concepts we take for granted, standardized currency, professional civil service, protected highways, passport systems, and religious tolerance, all have roots in Persian innovation. The next time you mail a package, drive on a federal highway, exchange currency while traveling abroad, or worship freely in a diverse society, you're experiencing echoes of innovations pioneered by Persian administrators 2,500 years ago. As we continue our journey through Persian history, We'll explore how this remarkable administrative system weathered external threats and internal challenges, and how its legacy continues to shape our understanding of effective governance in diverse societies. The fall of empire, Alexander, and the end of Persian dominance. Picture a summer night in 330 BCE. Flames leap skyward, casting dancing shadows across stone reliefs of kings and tribute bearers. The cedar beams of Persepolis, architectural masterpieces that had taken generations to create, crack and collapse in the inferno. Standing before this spectacular destruction is a young Macedonian king, not yet 30 years old, watching 2 centuries of Persian imperial might literally go up in smoke. How did Alexander the Great, in just 4 short years, dismantle what had been the world's most sophisticated empire? And what does it tell us about the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations? The Whirlwind Campaign, Alexander crosses into Asia. The story begins on a spring morning in 334 BCE at the Hellespont, modern Dardanelles, where Alexander and his army of 40,000 crossed from Europe to Asia. Unlike previous Greek expeditions against Persia, this wasn't merely a punitive raid or border skirmish. It was an all-or-nothing gambit for imperial conquest. Alexander threw his spear from his ship and drove it into Asian soil, writes the Roman historian Arrian, declaring that he accepted Asia from the gods as spear-won territory. This theatrical gesture masked a profound strategic reality. The young king had left himself no retreat. He even reportedly burned his ships upon landing, though historians debate this detail, committing his forces to victory or death on Persian soil. The Persian regional commanders, despite warnings about this new threat, fatally underestimated both Alexander's ambitions and abilities. They gathered their forces near the Granicus River, expecting to deal with what they perceived as just another Greek adventurer. Granicus. The opening blow. At the Granicus River in May 334 BCE, Persian cavalry lined the eastern bank, presenting what they believed was an impenetrable defense. Alexander, ignoring cautious advisors who suggested waiting until morning, ordered an immediate crossing in late afternoon, catching the Persians off guard and denying them time to perfect their position. The clash that followed was chaotic and brutal. Alexander, conspicuous in his white-plumed helmet and gleaming armor, led his companion cavalry directly into the heart of the Persian force. At one point, his life hung by a thread when a Persian nobleman's axe split his helmet. Only the quick intervention of his general Clitus saved the young king from death before his campaign had truly begun. "I have never seen such reckless courage," a captured Persian officer reportedly said afterward. "He fights as though he has already conquered the world and fears no one." By nightfall, the Persian force was shattered. Alexander's victory wasn't just military, it was psychological. Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia now faced a stark choice: switch sides or face execution for treason against their fellow Greeks. Most chose the former, depriving Persia of experienced infantry in later battles. Issus. Darius meets his match. The Persian king. Darius III, watching Alexander's relentless advance through Asia Minor, finally recognized the existential threat. In November 333 BCE, he personally led a massive army to intercept Alexander near Issus, along the Mediterranean coast in what is now southern Turkey. Darius selected the battlefield carefully, a narrow coastal plain where his numerical advantage, perhaps 100,000 men to Alexander's 40,000, would be partially neutralized but still decisive. What he didn't anticipate was Alexander's uncanny ability to identify and exploit weaknesses. The battle opened with a thunderous exchange of missile fire, arrows from the Persian side meeting javelins from the Greeks. As the infantry lines collided in the center, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a sudden slashing charge directly toward Darius himself. Contemporary accounts describe the Persian king's chariot becoming entangled amidst the chaos, forcing him to mount a horse and flee the battlefield, abandoning his army, his treasury, and even his family. A Persian courtier later justified this retreat. "The king withdrew to organize our defenses elsewhere," Alexander's response was cutting. A king who abandons his mother, wife, and children has no intention of organizing anything except his escape. The capture of the Persian royal family, whom Alexander treated with remarkable respect, created both a propaganda victory and potential leverage. When Darius sent envoys offering to cede all territory west of the Euphrates in exchange for his family, Alexander's reply was telling, "I am already lord of all Asia. If I want to marry your daughter, I shall do so whether you give her to me or not." Gaugamela. The decisive encounter. For nearly 2 years after Issus, Alexander systematically secured the Mediterranean coastline, conquered Egypt, where priests proclaimed him son of Amun-Ra, and consolidated his control over the western provinces. This deliberate pace gave Darius time to raise a new army from his eastern territories, perhaps his only strategic advantage in the entire campaign. In September 331 BCE, the two kings met for their final confrontation near Gaugamela in northern Mesopotamia, modern Iraq. Darius, learning from previous defeats, chose a flat plain that favored his cavalry and chariots, and even had the ground leveled to facilitate their movement. The night before, the battle revealed the contrasting leadership styles that would determine its outcome. Darius kept his troops on alert all night, fearing a surprise attack that never came. Alexander, confident in his battle plan, slept so soundly his generals had to wake him on the morning of the engagement. When a staff officer suggested a night attack to offset their numerical disadvantage, Alexander reportedly replied, "I will not steal my victory." This wasn't mere bravado, but calculated psychology. He wanted not just to defeat the Persian army, but to break its spirit by winning an open battle. The encounter itself was a masterclass in battlefield adaptation. Darius launched his feared scythed chariots, horse-drawn vehicles with blades extending from their wheels, designed to cut through infantry formations. But the disciplined Macedonian phalanx simply opened lanes, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through before closing ranks again. As the battle progressed, Alexander noticed Darius committing reserves to stop a feint on the Macedonian right wing, creating a gap in the Persian center. Seizing this opportunity, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a wedge formation directly toward Darius, shattering the Persian royal guard. Once again, facing the prospect of capture or death, Darius fled the field, and his army disintegrated shortly after. A captured Persian commander later described the psychological impact. "We didn't just lose a battle, we lost our belief that the empire could still be saved." The end of Darius. Betrayal in Bactria. For Darius III, the aftermath of Gaugamela was a desperate flight eastward, hoping to rally forces in his remaining provinces. As Alexander captured the imperial capitals, Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis, Darius's authority crumbled. By July 330 BCE, the Persian king was a fugitive in his own realm, accompanied by a dwindling retinue. Near what is now the Iran-Turkmenistan border, his own lieutenants, led by the Bactrian satrap Bessus, staged a coup. They placed Darius in golden chains, a final cruel irony for a man who had once commanded unimaginable wealth. When Alexander's advance forces closed in, the conspirators fatally wounded Darius and fled. In one of history's most dramatic moments, Alexander arrived just in time to witness the last breaths of his royal adversary. Sources disagree on whether any words were exchanged, but all agree that Alexander covered the fallen king with his own cloak, a gesture of respect from one ruler to another. "Now hunt down those who betrayed their king," Alexander reportedly told his companions, "for they have committed a crime against all monarchs." The burning of Persepolis, triumph and destruction. Perhaps no event better symbolizes the fall of the Achaemenid Empire than the burning of Persepolis in May 330 BCE. Alexander had captured this ceremonial heart of the Persian Empire months earlier, allowing his troops to plunder its treasuries, reportedly requiring 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to transport the gold and silver. Yet the structures themselves initially remained intact until that fateful night. Ancient accounts differ on exactly what happened. Diodorus Siculus claims that during a drunken celebration, the Athenian courtesan Thais suggested burning the palace as revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens 150 years earlier. Arrian, considered more reliable, suggests it was a calculated political act, a signal to Asia that Achaemenid rule was irrevocably finished. Whatever the case, the flames that consumed Persepolis that night marked a symbolic funeral pyre for the Persian Empire. The blackened ruins of the Apadana and the Gate of All Nations, architectural marvels that had welcomed ambassadors from across the known world, now stood as monuments to fallen glory. A Persian nobleman who witnessed the destruction reportedly asked Alexander, "Is this how Greeks bring civilization to Asia?" Alexander's alleged reply reveals his complex attitude toward his conquest. This is how Greeks exact vengeance for those who threatened freedom. Yet within months of this destruction, a remarkable transformation began in Alexander himself. The conqueror conquered Alexander's Persianization. As Alexander pushed deeper into the former Persian territories, a curious reversal began to unfold. The conqueror began adopting the customs, dress, and administrative systems of the conquered. He retained the satrapy system, keeping many Persian officials in their positions. He began wearing Persian royal attire, adopted Persian court ceremonies, including proskynesis, ritual prostration, and actively encouraged intermarriage between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen. At a mass wedding ceremony in Susa, Alexander himself married Darius's daughter Statira, symbolically fusing the Macedonian and Achaemenid royal lines. This cultural adaptation sparked fierce resistance among his Macedonian veterans, who saw it as betrayal of their Greek identity. During a banquet at Maracanda, modern Samarkand, the tensions erupted when Alexander killed his close friend Clytus in a drunken rage after Clytus criticized his orientalizing tendencies. A Macedonian soldier reportedly grumbled, "We set out to turn Persians into Greeks, but now we're turning into Persians ourselves." Alexander's response was visionary. "I didn't conquer Asia to create a Greek province, but to build a world where Persian and Greek could be equals." By 323 BCE, Alexander had pushed as far as the Indus Valley before his exhausted troops finally refused to march further. On the return journey to Babylon, he focused increasingly on administrative organization, launching massive infrastructure projects and planning future campaigns. But fate had other plans. In June 323 BCE, after a lengthy drinking party, Alexander fell ill with a fever. 12 days later, not yet 33 years old, the conqueror of the known world died, leaving behind an empire without a clear successor. The Persian legacy in the Hellenistic world. The immediate aftermath of Alexander's death saw his empire fracture among his generals, the Diadochi or successors. In former Persian territories, the Seleucid dynasty established control, maintaining much of the administrative framework they had inherited. The Hellenistic age that followed represented not the replacement of Persian civilization but its transformation through fusion with Greek elements. Greek-style cities sprang up across former Persian lands, but they incorporated local architectural styles and religious practices. Greek became the language of administration, but Persian continued to be spoken in homes and markets. This cultural synthesis, preserved in artifacts from Ai-Khanum in Afghanistan to Seleucia on the Tigris in Iraq, reveals the enduring impact of Persian civilization even after its political collapse. Alexander may have conquered Persia, but Persian ideas about imperial administration, religious tolerance, and multicultural governance conquered the Hellenistic kingdoms that succeeded them. When the Roman general Pompey the Great reached the eastern Mediterranean 2 centuries later, he found cultures that were neither fully Greek nor traditionally Eastern, but a unique hybrid born from the collision of Alexander's armies with Persia's imperial legacy. The lessons of empire's fall. What can we learn from the breathtaking speed with which Alexander dismantled what had been history's most sophisticated empire? First, that military innovations can rapidly overcome even the most established powers. The Macedonian phalanx, combined with heavy cavalry and flexible light infantry, created a tactical system that the Persian military, still organized along traditional lines, couldn't counter effectively. Second, that leadership matters enormously in times of crisis. The contrast between Alexander's bold personal command and Darius's cautious approach, and twice fleeing the battlefield, had psychological impacts far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Third, that even the most spectacular collapses contain seeds of continuity. When we look beyond the drama of burning palaces and decisive battles, we see that Persian administrative systems, cultural practices, and governance models survived their creators, absorbed and adapted by their conquerors. As you walk today among the fire-blackened ruins of Persepolis, you're witnessing not just the end of one empire, but the birth pains of a new cultural synthesis that would shape the development of civilizations from Europe to India. The Persian Empire died in flames on that spring night in 330 BCE, but its legacy continued to shape the world Alexander thought he had conquered. In our next exploration, we'll see how Persian ideas, art, and religion would reemerge under new dynasties, proving that cultural heritage often outlasts political structures, and that what seems like an ending is often merely transformation. Persia reborn, the Parthian and Sassanian empires. Picture yourself standing on a windswept hill overlooking the Mesopotamian plain in 53 BCE. The horizon darkens with dust as thousands of mounted warriors appear, their armor glinting in the desert sun. Roman legionaries, the world's most disciplined infantry, form their battle lines with practiced precision. Yet within hours, these same legionaries will lie dead or captured, their golden eagles seized, their commander's severed head destined for use as a prop in a Persian theatrical performance. This wasn't just another border skirmish. It was the Battle of Kari, where Parthian horsemen annihilated a Roman army and announced to the Mediterranean world that Persia had risen again. The Parthian revival, nomads to empire builders. The story begins in the remote northeastern reaches of the Iranian Plateau, where a Scythian-related nomadic people called the Parni watched the slow disintegration of Alexander's empire with calculating eyes. Under their leader Arsaces, they seized the opportunity presented by Seleucid weakness, capturing the province of Parthia in 247 BCE, a date that marks the birth of a new Persian empire. "We are not Greeks wearing Persian clothes," an early Parthian king reportedly told a Seleucid envoy. "We are the descendants of Cyrus and Darius, reclaiming what is rightfully ours." This wasn't entirely true. The Parthians were newcomers rather than direct heirs of the Achaemenids, but the claim to Persian heritage provided powerful legitimacy as they expanded from their remote corner to gradually absorb the heartlands of the former Persian Empire. The Parthian approach differed dramatically from the centralized administration of the Achaemenids. Their strength lay in a decentralized feudal system that granted considerable autonomy to local rulers and aristocratic clans. The king was first among equals, rather than an absolute monarch, governing through consensus with powerful noble houses like the Suren and Karen, whose private armies often outnumbered royal forces. Historians often describe Parthian culture as a hybrid, Persian in aspiration, with strong Greek influences left over from Alexander's conquests, yet maintaining distinctive elements from their nomadic origins. This cultural flexibility became their greatest strength, allowing them to integrate diverse populations into their realm without forcing assimilation. Masters of the Parthian shot, military innovation, and Roman rivalry. The Parthian military revolution centered on two elite cavalry types that would dominate battlefields for centuries: horse archers and heavily armored cataphracts. Parthian mounted archers developed the famous Parthian shot, the ability to fire arrows with deadly accuracy while retreating at full gallop, often turning completely in the saddle to shoot backward. This tactic proved devastating against infantry-focused armies like Rome's, whose soldiers could neither catch the swift horsemen nor effectively counter their missile attacks. A Roman veteran of Eastern campaigns wrote home, "They attack and flee in the same moment. When you think they are routed, that is precisely when you are in greatest danger." Complementing these light cavalry were the cataphracts, heavily armored horsemen and their equally armored mounts, carrying long lances capable of shattering infantry formations. Together, these forces created a deadly combination of firepower and shock tactics that repeatedly confounded Roman generals. The rivalry with Rome defined Parthian foreign policy for nearly 3 centuries. The catastrophic Roman defeat at Carrhae in 53 BCE, where wealthy triumvir Marcus Licinius Crassus lost his life along with 20,000 legionaries, established the Euphrates River as the de facto boundary between the empires. Though Roman emperors like Trajan and Septimius Severus occasionally pushed beyond this frontier, their conquests proved temporary. The Parthians gave Rome something it rarely experienced elsewhere, a rival it could neither intimidate nor decisively defeat, notes historian Warwick Ball. What emerged was history's first true balance of power, with 2 empires of roughly equal strength recognizing their limitations against each other. Diplomatic exchanges became as important as military confrontations, with embassies traveling between Rome and the Parthian capital at Ctesiphon bearing gifts, treaties, and occasionally royal hostages as guarantees of good behavior. Silk Road. Middlemen. The wealth of nations. The Parthian Empire's location placed it squarely astride the emerging Silk Road, the network of trade routes connecting the Roman world with China, India, and Central Asia. This positioning proved immensely profitable, as Parthian merchants and cities extracted tariffs and added value to goods moving in both directions. Imagine the bazaars of Parthian cities like Merv, Ecbatana, or Seleucia on the Tigris, bustling with merchants speaking dozens of languages, warehouses filled with Chinese silk, Indian spices, Baltic amber, and Roman glassware. These trading hubs became cosmopolitan centers where ideas and technologies spread alongside commercial goods. A Chinese diplomatic account describes arriving at the Parthian court. Their markets overflow with goods from all directions. Gold and silver are used so commonly that even common people possess quantities that would make them wealthy in our land. Archaeological excavations confirm this prosperity through discoveries of imported goods throughout the empire. Roman coins found as far east as modern Afghanistan and Chinese artifacts unearthed in Mesopotamia testify to the Parthians' central role in Eurasian trade networks. This economic power translated into political influence, allowing the Parthians to project strength beyond their actual military capabilities. When Chinese and Roman sources refer to the Parthians controlling trade between East and West, they weren't exaggerating. For centuries, virtually all luxury goods passing between these regions traveled through Parthian territory. Internal challenges and the rise of Sassanians. By the early 3rd century CE, however, the very flexibility that had been the Parthian strength began to undermine imperial cohesion. The decentralized system that enabled rapid expansion now hindered unified action. Noble families increasingly pursued their own interests rather than imperial objectives, while succession disputes weakened central authority. In the province of Pars, ancient Persia, a local ruler named Ardashir challenged his Parthian overlords. Unlike previous rebellions, this one gained momentum because Ardashir offered something powerfully appealing: a return to true Persian identity centered around Zoroastrian orthodoxy and the glorious legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. In 224 CE, Ardashir defeated the last Parthian king, Artabanus Theith, in battle, establishing the Sassanian dynasty that would rule Persia for the next 4 centuries. The transition wasn't merely political, but represented a profound cultural and religious transformation. "I am the descendant of gods, son of the sacred fire," Ardashir declared on his coins and inscriptions. "I have restored the kingdom of Iran to its rightful glory." The Sassanian Renaissance, revival of Persian identity. Where the Parthians had been content with a decentralized, multicultural empire, the Sassanians pursued centralization, religious orthodoxy, and the deliberate revival of pre-Hellenistic Persian traditions. They abandoned the feudal system in favor of a bureaucracy directly controlled by the king, divided the empire into standardized provinces, and established Zoroastrianism as the state religion. Rock reliefs commissioned by Sassanian kings at sites like Naksh-i Rustam deliberately echo Achaemenid imagery, explicitly connecting the new dynasty to Persia's ancient glory. Trilingual inscriptions, in Middle Persian, Parthian, and Greek, proclaimed their legitimacy and documented their achievements, directly mimicking the style of Darius the Great's Behistun inscription. Shapur Fars R 240-270 CE, the second Sassanian king, exemplified this new Persian assertiveness. In a series of campaigns against Rome, he achieved what no Eastern ruler had done before. He captured a Roman emperor alive. The humiliation of Valerian in 260 CE sent shockwaves through the Roman world and was immortalized in a triumphal rock carving showing Shapur on horseback with the kneeling emperor before him. The Caesar lied again, Shapur's inscription declares, recounting 3 successive victories over Roman forces. This was more than military boasting. It was a declaration that Persia had reclaimed its place as Rome's equal on the world stage. Architects of a new golden age under Khosrow R 531-579 CE, known as Anushirvan, Immortal Soul, the Sassanian Empire reached its cultural and administrative zenith. His reign witnessed sweeping reforms that modernized the state and unleashed a remarkable cultural flowering. Khosrow reorganized the taxation system, replacing arbitrary levies with a fixed land tax based on careful surveys, providing both predictable revenue for the state and stability for farmers. He divided the empire into 4 military zones, each under a spabed, general, creating a more responsive defensive system while preventing any single commander from becoming too powerful. A Byzantine ambassador to Khosrow's court left this description. The king sits on a golden throne beneath a great dome adorned with celestial symbols. Around him, ministers and scribes work with remarkable efficiency, recording decisions and dispatching orders to the farthest reaches of the realm. The impression is of a living clockwork, each part moving in precise harmony. The cultural achievements of this period were equally impressive. At Gundashapur, Khosrow established what some consider the world's first university and teaching hospital. Here, scholars from across the known world, Persians, Greeks, Syrians, Indians, translated and synthesized knowledge from different civilizations. When Emperor Justinian closed the philosophical schools of Athens in 529 CE, refugee philosophers found welcome at Khosrow's court. Similarly, Christian scholars fleeing Byzantine persecution brought medical and scientific texts, translating them into Middle Persian and Syriac. This intellectual openness, paradoxically occurring under a regime that enforced Zoroastrian orthodoxy in other spheres, allowed Persian culture to absorb and preserve knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. The wise ruler, Khosrow reportedly said, gathers wisdom wherever it grows, regardless of the soil that nurtured it. Final defiance, the Arab challenge. The last great Sassanian king, Khosrow II, Rao 590, 628 CE, initially extended Persian power to its greatest extent since the Achaemenids, conquering Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia from the Byzantines. Yet this overextension, combined with the exhaustion of both the Persian and Byzantine empires after decades of warfare, created an opening for a new power rising from the Arabian Peninsula. By 636 CE, Arab Muslim armies under the early caliphs had begun probing Sassanian territory. Despite being battle-hardened veterans, the Persian forces found themselves outmaneuvered by the highly mobile Arab cavalry at the Battle of Sadisiyah. The death of the Persian commander Rostam Farrokhzad shattered Persian morale, leading to a decisive defeat. The last Sassanian king, Yazdegerd III, just 21 years old, fled eastward as Arab forces captured the capital at Ctesiphon. For years, he attempted to rally resistance, but the empire's resources were exhausted. The final blow came at the Battle of Nihavand in 642 CE, after which organized Persian resistance collapsed. Yazdegerd wandered with a dwindling retinue until his murder in 651 CE, marking the end of not just the Sassanian dynasty but of pre-Islamic Persian sovereignty. A poem attributed to a Persian nobleman of this period captures the sense of world-ending catastrophe. The mighty elephant has fallen, the lion's claws are broken, the peacock's feathers scattered to the wind. What was once solid as mountain is now fine as dust. Legacy, Persia, beyond Persia. Yet this was not the end of Persian civilization, far from it. As the initial shock of conquest receded, Persians gradually assumed influential positions within the Islamic caliphates. Their administrative expertise, scientific knowledge, and artistic traditions proved indispensable to the new rulers. The Abbasid Caliphate, 750–1258 CE, particularly embraced Persian culture, moving its capital to Baghdad, close to the old Sassanian center at Ctesiphon. Persian-influenced architecture, court ceremonies, and administrative practices transformed Islamic governance. In many ways, the caliphate became a fusion of Arab religious authority with Persian imperial traditions. Persian literature found new expression in the Islamic era through poets like Ferdowsi, whose epic Shahnameh, Book of Kings, preserved the pre-Islamic historical memory and mythology despite being written in the 10th century CE. Scientific advances continued through Persian scholars working in Arabic, such as Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and al-Khwarizmi, whose works on medicine, mathematics, and astronomy would eventually help spark the European Renaissance. The arts of the Sassanian period, silver plate with hunting scenes, stucco decorations, textile patterns, continued to influence Islamic art for centuries. Even in Europe, Sassanian motifs appeared in Byzantine silks, Carolingian metalwork, and Romanesque sculpture, transmitted through trade goods and diplomatic gifts. The Sassanians created the template for what we now consider classical Persian culture, observes historian Richard Fry. Though their empire fell, their aesthetic and intellectual achievements were so compelling that they were adopted rather than erased by their conquerors. The Parthian and Sassanian achievement. What the Parthian and Sassanian empires accomplished was remarkable. They reclaimed Persian identity after centuries of Hellenistic rule and preserved it for over 800 years, creating distinctive syntheses of ancient traditions with new innovations. The Parthians' greatest achievement was their adaptive flexibility. Their decentralized system allowed them to incorporate diverse peoples while maintaining Persian core identity. Their military innovations, particularly their devastating cavalry tactics, provided a model that would influence warfare from China to Rome. And their facilitation of Silk Road trade created unprecedented prosperity while connecting distant civilizations. The Sassanians, by contrast, excelled through centralization, cultural revival, and intellectual synthesis. Their administrative system set standards for efficiency that later Islamic states would emulate. Their patronage of learning preserved and extended knowledge from multiple civilizations during Europe's darkest hours. Their artistic and architectural innovations created a distinctly Persian aesthetic that continues to influence Iranian identity today. Together, these empires demonstrated the remarkable resilience of Persian civilization, its capacity to absorb external influences while maintaining its essential character, to fall politically yet triumph culturally, and to systematically organize diverse peoples and territories under coherent rule. As we've seen from the Achaemenid beginnings through Parthian and Sassanian eras, Persia consistently pioneered solutions to the fundamental challenges of empire: how to govern vast territories with limited technology, how to balance central authority with local autonomy, and how to create meaningful unity among diverse populations. These lessons remain relevant in our own complex, multicultural world. Though the Arab conquest ended the pre-Islamic Persian empires, it could not extinguish Persian civilization itself. In our next exploration, we'll see how Persian culture not only survived, but thrived within the Islamic world, shaping art, science, governance, and spirituality from Baghdad to Delhi, and eventually re-emerging in distinctive new imperial forms that would once again place Persia at the center of world history.